Queen of Shadows time. I'm so excited for this one. This is my favorite of the Throne of Glass series. In fact, it's my favorite SarahJMaas. It's one of my favorite books of all time. There are so many moments in this that are so good. I laughed, I cried, I cheered. The girls are just, every girl in this book, the girlies in this book, maybe not every girl, but the girlies in this book are just, they're doing what needs to be done. So I'm excited to talk to you about everything that they're up to, because it's shenanigans in the best of ways. So let's just jump right in. Let's not waste any time. Like usual, we're going to start off with like a little quickity-doo-dah recap of where everyone has been. A warning, as usual, full spoilers for the entire Queen of Shadows book. I will be going kind of in chronological order, so if you're following along, you should be mostly fine. First thing we're going to do is just kind of recap where everyone's at. First, we have our girl Aelin. Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, aka Celaena Sarthothian. We found out at the end of Crown of Midnight that they're the same girly. And in Airfire, Celaena like reconciled herself to the fact that she is truly Aelin, the lost queen of Terrasen, aka the Heir of Fire, aka Fireheart, aka Ardalayne's assassin, the most notorious 17-year-old assassin that ever was, back when she was 17. She's 19 now, I believe. Alentia, the spirit that cannot be broken, and beloved of Mallow Lightbringer. I'm sure she has some more names. Like, girly cannot stop collecting nicknames. We're catching up with Aelin. She's on her way back from Wendelin. She is going to be back in Rifthold. She spent the whole last book in Wendelin, which is this island off the coast, we'll talk about it in a second, where she was training so she could go meet Maeve, the Queen of the Fae, with her new bestie bro, Rowan Whitethorn. But now she's on her way back to Rifthold. She's on her way back so she can get the last word key, because she thinks she knows where it is, and she thinks it's with Arobynn. Okay. Then we have Mr. Dorian Havillard, the Crown Prince of Ardalayne, and most importantly, Chaol's BFF. He is currently in a Wordstone Collar. At the end of the last book, his dad, who's the King of Ardalayne, chopped his girlfriend's head off, and then immediately was like, oh, let's slip this little collar on you. The Wordstone Collar, we have come to find out, is a way for the Valg princes to possess a body, essentially. And so he's currently being possessed by a Valg prince. Yikes! Then we have Chaol Westfall, who is now, his only title besides Chaol Westfall is Oathbreaker, Traitor, and Liar. He was the heir to Anel, the lorddom in Anel. I don't know where he stands there. I think if you're a traitor to the crown, you don't get to be a lord anymore. But he also was the captain of the guard. He doesn't have that position anymore, because remember how I just told you that the king just chopped off his bestie's girlfriend's head. So yeah, he's not hanging out with the king anymore, and so now he's just like a traitor. He's running around in the streets, hiding out, working with the rebels. Then we have Rowan Whitethorn, who we met in the last book, and he was the one who's training Aelin. He is Fae, and he used to be one of Maeve's royal guards people, the cadre, as Aelin calls him, but he got released from the cadre and is now blood oathed to Aelin. But we won't see him at the beginning of this book because he is currently back in Wendelin, where Aelin left him. She said, you have to hang out here because you are too conspicuous to come with me to Rifthold, and so that's where he is. And also he can turn into a hawk, which is why there's a hawk picture, because sometimes he's a hawk. If we see a hawk in this book, it's probably Rowan. And then we have Mr. Aedion Ashriver, aka the Wolf of the North. He is Aelin's cousin. He's a few years older than her, but they like grew up together. They spent like their childhood together until Terrasen fell when Aelin was 8, and I think Aedion was like 11. I think he's like 3 or 4 years older than her. He was a general in the king's army, but also in that whole beheading situation, was found out to be a rebel and a traitor. And so he's currently in the dungeon awaiting execution because the king is going to execute him in like a trap to get Aelin. So he's waiting on Aedion's execution so he can like lay a trap to hopefully catch Aelin, who he doesn't know Aelin and Celaena are the same person yet. He hasn't been made awares. But currently Aedion is just hanging out in the dungeon waiting for that to happen. Then we have Miss Manon. Manon is my favorite character, sort of. I love Aelin and Manon equally. I can't pick. You cannot make me. She is the White Demon. She is the wing leader of the Iron Teeth Witches. She was made that at the very end of last book, and like the head of the 13, which is her little like mini coven within the Black Beaks. And she is currently headed to Moranth with the 13. Speaking of the witches, I'm not going to go into as much depth with these characters, but just some like reminders of who they are and kind of their vibes. Their vibes. Yeah, we want to make sure you're clear on their vibes. Okay, I don't want you to be confused. First we have Astrid, who's Manon second. She seems like very sympathetic to a sense of morality, maybe. She like, maybe the witches in general like feel that they like, their only sense of morality is like loyalty to other witches. Beyond that, they seem to be like prize morallessness. But not Astrid. Astrid has something else going on. We're going to learn more about Astrid over the next books, and she's very interesting as a character. But she is currently Manon second in command. She's like the vice captain of the 13. Then we have Abraxas. Abraxas is Manon's wyvern. So all the witches were kind of given these wyvern by the king's army, and Manon has this little runt of the litter, Abraxas, but Manon loves Abraxas because he has a warrior's heart. And I love Abraxas because he's a little precious angel gem that we don't deserve. And then we have Manon's grandmother. Manon's grandmother is the high matron of the Blackbeaks, and she's the one that seems to be coordinating all of these arrangements between the witches and like the king's forces. And she's just like a mean, nasty lady. I also wanted to kind of recap the villains, who they are, and what their deal is. So first we have the king of Aelin. He is the guy that was just beheading his son's girlfriend. And he is just this conqueror. He's been slowly taking over the whole continent over the course of the last few decades. And he also has like banned magic. Like magic has been like turned off essentially in the kingdom. We found out last book how he's been doing this. There's these black stone towers that are sprinkled throughout, and he's used those to like deaden magic in the whole kingdom. Okay, he's just like bad news. He's mean. He's trying to take over everyone. He's been putting these wordstone collars on people. He also has wordstone rings, which aren't quite as powerful, but do kind of deal with the Valg as well and put people under his command. Like if you're wearing a wordstone ring, you have to listen to what the king says. And then we have Queen Maeve. Queen Maeve is Queen of the Fae. She lives over in Dorinel, which is over in Wendelin, by Wendelin. I'm unclear if they're separate places or like Dorinel's within Wendelin. It's confusing to me, okay? But she just has like terrible vibes. We know that she's like very abusive to her warriors, her like cadre of men that hang out with her. So that's not like super cool and chill, especially since we love Rowan. No, we don't exactly know what her deal is. She seems to want the word keys as well. We don't know what her plan is with them, but like we're suspicious of Miss Maeve. And then we have Arobynn Hamel. Arobynn Hamel, despite the fact that he's playing like the biggest villain in this, in terms of like scope, there are a few characters that make my blood boil as much as Arobynn Hamel. This is the first time we'll have seen him on page since Assassin's Blade, and oh my god, every time he's in a scene, like literally, I have like a physical reaction. How mad this man makes me. He essentially found Aelin on the shores of a frozen river when she was a small child and adopted her. He's head of the Assassins Guild, and he raised her up to be an assassin. That's why she was the most notorious assassin in the land at 17, because she just spent her whole life training, and he is just like such a piece of garbage. Okay, he's just terrible. We'll kind of see it throughout this book, but he's just like literally the worsty worst. Here's a quick map of where everyone is. So we've got Terracent up north where the trees are. Rowan out to sea, out that way. And then we also have the gang over in Rifthold. That's where the glass castle is. That's where Chaol, Aelin, and Dorian start this book. Aelin just arrived in Rifthold as we start. And then Manon is just to the west over in Moranth. So Moranth is this like mountain kind of outpost, and that's where she and Abraxas are hanging out. Part 1, Lady of Shadows. We start with Mr. Dorian. There was a thing waiting in the darkness. It was ancient and cruel and paced in the shadows, leashing his mind. It was not of his world, and had been brought here to fill him with its primordial cold. Some invisible barrier still separated them, but the wall crumbled a little bit more every time the thing stalked along its length, testing its strength. He could not remember his name. So Dorian's not doing well. Dorian is not doing well, and occasionally we just like check in on him. The chapters are always like 2 pages long, and it's just like Dorian's having a bad time. So he's currently stuck in his head in this like dark place in his mind. The Valg is like trying to eventually like shatter him, like take over completely, but he's been able to like wall himself off into this small corner of his mind and like maintain possession over that. That means he's kind of lost a lot. He like vaguely remembers Sorcer's beheading, but he can't remember her name. He just remembers that he loved her and he like was unable to save her. And then he also thinks to himself, this is like the sweetest, cutest thing ever. Oh, it makes me so sad. He thinks to himself, oh, I think I used to be a prince. But then he's like, that can't be right because the prince would have saved her. Oh, that's the cutest fairy tale thing I've ever heard. And then the last line in this chapter, but there was a thing waiting in the darkness and he could not bring himself to fight it for much longer. So, great. Yay, Dorian. He's having a really rough time. Then we have Miss Aelin, Ash River, Galathinius, Heir of Fire, beloved of Mala Lightbringer, and rightful queen of Terrascend. She's back in Rifthold, and she's ready to cut some people up. She's at the Vault, which is like the center for criminal activity in Rifthold. It's like there's gambling dens, there's like fighting pits, there's like bars. It's like a fun time. It's like a Chuck E. Cheese for criminals. She's there to gather some information about what she missed while she was in Wendelin. Like, maybe most importantly, that Chaol is safe. If you recall, back in Crown of Midnight, Chaol and Aelin had like a pretty like serious like romance between them, and things kind of crumbled and fell apart as they began to like not trust each other for a multitude of reasons around the time of Nehemiah's death. You know, Aelin still wants him to be safe. There's still some like lingering feelings there in the background, maybe, even though things sort of ended. It was kind of not a clean break, and so Aelin is still cares for Chaol, wants to make sure that he is doing okay. And she's also dyed her hair red. She'll be a redhead for a good chunk of this book because she knows that they'll be looking for a blondie. Also, she's up to maybe some schemes. We love. We actually find out, in fact, that she tells us that on the boat, it was like a 2 or 3 week journey. I can't quite recall, but it was like a long journey from Wendelin back to Rifthold. She spent the first day just like kind of like resting, missing Rowan, letting herself like self-care. But then she spent the rest of the time she was on the boat scheming, plotting, planning. And honestly, the world is at rights when Aelin is plotting, scheming, planning. And we don't know about these schemes. This is Aelin's favorite thing to do. She hatches a little schemey scheme. And then when the schemey scheme is all done and we like see it be successful, she's like, that was all my schemey scheme. Here's all the pieces I put into place that you saw me do. And now it all came together. And it's the best. Okay? And she was plotting and scheming on her little boat ride. And so her little mind was a cooking. At the Vault, she sees Taryn, we'll call him Taryn. Taryn come in, who she knows is Arobynn's second. He was like a little bit lower down the list when she was actually with Arobynn, but a lot of people have died since then, which makes her realize that Arobynn's there, and she spots Arobynn in a corner, and pretty soon after she spots Arobynn, a client comes in, and he has like a big hood on, and he's like sneaking over there, but Aelin immediately is like, oh, that's Chaol. She's like, I could spot that man anywhere. And she isn't able to kind of get close enough to see what Chaol and Arobynn are talking about, but she like can tell that Chaol like seems to be mostly okay. Even though it's so strange to her that he'd be down in the vault. Like, Chaol was like an upstanding citizen. Like, he was not about any funny business. He was not about breaking the rules. He did not love that she was an assassin. So she's a little confused what would bring him to the vaults one and to be talking to Arobynn. So that's a little bit curious. Chaol also has a girl with him, and she's not sure who that girl is. She doesn't recognize her. So she's a little sus of that. But she's not ready to have like a combo with Chaol yet. Also, this is not the environment to have the combo. She doesn't really want to give Arobynn any ammo. And so she sneaks over to a card table and like hides. And she keeps an eye on him, but like makes sure to stay out of sight. And then as he's leaving, he like walks right by her. And Aelin is so annoyed that he doesn't like recognize her. She's like, okay, you were being way sneakier. And I immediately was able to clock you. I just have red hair and you can't see me. Like, you don't see me. I just want to, like, remind Aelin that Chaol is the most unobservant man, maybe on the planet. Definitely in this book. Like, he never knows what's happening around him. His sense of awareness, he's just, like, exceptionally unobservant. The amount of times this man has been kidnapped, it's been more than once that he's been held at knife point. Someone has snuck up behind him. Someone was eavesdropping in the corner and he didn't notice all the time to Chaol. Chaol does not pay attention, so I don't think she should feel too hurt, because he wouldn't notice, even if she'd been blonde and maybe staring at him. Arobynn obviously spots her because Arobynn is much more observant than Chaol. And he immediately is like, hello, darling, and they like go and chat in the corner. Ugh, I like literally, it just like, ew, gets inside my bones and makes me go, yuck. Every time we see this man on the page. Anyway, they're chatting and he goes, hello, darling. And SarahJMaas loves a darling. Like, that's one thing she uses. And I think Arobynn, I fear Arobynn may have ruined darling for Rhysand. So he's like, hey, girlie, I don't like your new hair. And she's like, I'm trying to be a little bit sneaky. So like, that's why I did it. Okay, and then he says this. I have to read you this because I had to read it, so you're going to have to listen to it. I apologize ahead of time. He says, though I will say these past 2 years have made you more striking. Womanhood suits you. Or should I say queenhood? Ew, that's disgusting. Now at this point, she's like pretty mad at Arobynn. But in Assassin's Blade, she's in this weird spot where she like recognizes that Arobynn is like a mean, terrible man, but she also loves him. And there's also this weird dynamic in which she's like jealous of him, and she doesn't know whether he sees her like as a daughter or as like a mentee or like as a potential love interest. And the dynamics are weird. And Arobynn tries to make the dynamics continue to be weird, but Aelin has stepped into herself. She has like learned about her power. She has stepped into her queendom, and she's not taking it anymore. Anyway, he says he had heard rumors in Wendelin about a fire-breathing bitch queen. Ugh. which is like, you know, I think he meant it to be a rude thing, but obviously what a gorgeous thing to be called. What a gorgeous thing to be called, honestly. Like, she's like, yeah, slay, that was me. Aelin is like, okay, hey, girly. I'm just trying to get some, like, updates on what the heck is happening with Chaol. She obviously doesn't ask him directly because she knows that he would not be like, yeah, here's the deal with Chaol. But she is trying to, like, suss out what the two of them were talking about. And then Arobynn says to her, things have been wretched since you left. Arobynn said quietly, left, as if she'd willingly gone to Andover. As if he hadn't been responsible for it. As if she had just been away on holiday. But she knew him too well. He was still feeling her out, despite having lured her here. Perfect. He glanced at the thick scar across her palm, proof of the vow she'd made to Nehemia to free Elwë. Arobynn clicked his tongue. It hurts my heart to see so many new scars on you. I rather like them. It was the truth. And then Celaena and them are just chatting. And Celaena goes, first Sam, and then me and Wesley, do you have anyone left at the keep? And then she points out, she's like, there's a guy there, a guy there, another guy there, a guy there. She's like, all those guys are your men, your guards that you brought here. And Arobynn's like, oh, they thought they were doing a really good job hiding. I'm going to tell them that I'm like, you were able to spot them. They're going to be disappointed. Maybe you can come back home and teach them a few things. And she immediately clocks the word home. And she's like, no, sir. That place is not my home. And she's like, happy to come teach them. Clearly they are incompetent. And like, I'm happy to like share some knowledge with you. But I have other lodgings while I'm here. And Arobynn's like, oh my gosh, well, we know you're going to be in town for at least a few weeks because because of what happened. You know, you do know what happened, right? He's like clearly baiting her, and he tells her that Aedion was imprisoned by the king and he is planned to be executed at the king's birthday party in 3 days. And so like, obviously he knows Aelin's relationship to Aedion. He knows everything. He knows that she's like the queen of Terrasen and knows all of her history essentially. Aelin did not know this, but now she's like, okay, well great. I have to add that to my to-do list. I have to steal the word key from you, and then I also have to go free my cousin. Okay, check. And Arobynn's like getting up to leave. He's like planted that little seed of information, and he's also scheming. Unfortunately, he's not as good at it as Aelin is, because no one is. She's the best at everything. And he says to her, I do not expect you to trust me. I do not expect you to love me. And then he brushes his knuckles over her cheek. Ugh, disgusting. I've missed you. Literally, this man is literally vile. Just scum of the earth human being. I hate him so much. And Celaena's like, oh my gosh, it's so weird. You missed me. You didn't even come visit me. I've been in Rifthold like for a while. I was in the king's competition. I'm sure you knew about that because you know about everything. And Arobynn's like, how could I? I thought you were going to kill me on sight. And Aelin literally like is like, whatever. And then he says to her as he's like leaving, he says, all my resources are yours to help you rescue Aedion. And Celaena says, at what cost? And Arobynn says, oh my gosh, just like a tiny itty bitty, tiny whiny little favor. Warning bells pealed in her head. She'd be better off making a bargain with one of the Valg princes. There are creatures lurking in my city, he said. Creatures who wear the bodies of men like clothing. I want to know what they are. Too many threads were poised to tangle. She said carefully, what do you mean? The king's new guard has a few among its commanders. They are rounding up people suspected of being sympathetic to magic, or those who once possessed it. Executions every day at sunrise and sunset. These things seem to thrive on them. I'm surprised you didn't notice them lurking about the docks. And so Celaena tells him everything, well, sort of. Celaena tells him a lot of what she knows about, like, the Valg princess and the rings and the collars, but she leaves off the stuff about, like, the word marks, how the word mark magic works, and how the word keys work and the word gate, because remember, she's trying to gather these word keys. And honestly, like, Arobynn does not need to know about this, like, abundant power that, like, could, like, literally open a portal between worlds. And so she's like, okay, so collars are for these Valg princes, and they like completely take over the body of the person. Rings are much lesser demons, and they seem to be, they tend to not fully take over the person, but just like possess like control over them. You can kill them with fire, which is what I did back in Wendland with my fire magic, how I gained my new little nickname, but also you can chop off their heads. Multiple ways to get them. And Arobynn's like, I want one. Will you go get me one, please? If you get me one, I will help you with your cousin. and so like that's the like barter. That's the exchange. She gives him a Valg prince. She gets her cousin free, and Will gets to use his resources to help free her cousin. And then he leans down and kisses her cheek. Ugh. She's so much better than me. I couldn't have done it. I would have murdered him right there on the spot. Arobynn continued to pin her with that lover's gaze. Nothing is without a price. He brushed a kiss against her cheekbone, his lips soft and warm. She fought the shudder that trembled through her and made herself lean into him as he brought his mouth against her ear and whispered, "Tell me what I must do to atone. Tell me to crawl over hot coals, to sleep on a bed of nails, to carve up my flesh. Say the word and it is done, but let me care for you as I once did, before that madness poisoned my heart. Punish me, torture me, wreck me, but let me help you. Do this small thing for me, and let me lay the world at your feet." This man is the most vile thing that SarahJMaas ever written. He also gives her some information about where to find Chaol. He calls her captain. Disgusting. Okay. Then we check in with Mr. Aedion. He's in the dungeons and he's also having a bad time. Super fun. He has an infection and he's been hiding it from the guards because he's hoping to die soon. He's hoping he can die before his execution so he doesn't like tempt Aelin into exposing herself and like possibly like getting herself also captured. Essentially, he's just trying to keep her safe. And he thinks to himself, it would be such a relief, such a blessing, such a blessed relief to know he couldn't be used against her, and that he would soon see those he had secretly harbored in his shredded heart all those years. So he bore down on every spike of fever, every roiling fit of nausea and pain. Soon death would come to greet him. Aedion just hoped death arrived before Aelin did. I know, I think I gave Aedion crap, and we have not really seen Aedion be annoying yet. He will be annoying at points. He's kind of annoying sometimes. But like, honestly, he's also a good man. Back at the tavern, Arobynn has left, Aelin is there alone, and the King's Guard is arriving at the vaults. And Selena is not sure if Arobynn sold her out or if the guards had just followed the trail she had left from the docks. It's unclear. Either way, she wanted the King's men to show up. And she realizes almost immediately that there's no sign of Chaol. Like, Chaol did not show up with the King's Guard, and she like notes this because obviously he was right over here. So like, if the King's Guard had been coming this way, it would have made sense for him to come with them. He's not there. But that's okay. Aelin, like I said, laid a trail. So they would come here, and she's like so excited to fight some people. Yay, like a fun little treat for her. She's just gonna go fight some guards. And essentially, she like destroys the vaults. I think they end up being burnt to the ground, in fact. Leaves the vaults in tatters, and she also like during her fighting spree where she's just like destroying everything in sight, she murders the owner of the vaults because the owner of the vaults was an underling of Roqueferon, who was the man who killed Sam. And so she's like, goodbye. In fact, she says he had accidentally run into her knives repeatedly. So he was involved with Sam's death, and she says, we're gonna do a little revenge as a treat. And as she's running from the King's men, she ends up in the sewers, following the little tip that Arobynn gave her. And the sewers make her a little nervous because, again, in Assassin's Blade, there was one time where she like almost drowned in the sewers because she was down there on a mission for Arobynn, and then all the sewer grates got locked and the sewers got flooded. It was scary. She like almost drowned in just like human waste. What a way to go. And then she bumps into this hooded woman who is clearly working with Chaol, the woman she kind of like vaguely recognizes from the vaults. And then we have our introduction to one of our new girlies who is also killing it in this book. Shout out to the girlies. This is Nesryn Falik. She is one of the guards in the city, so she's not in the King's Guard. She doesn't work in the palace. She's a city guard, but she's also a rebel. Her family is from the southern continent, and they like migrated up to Rifthold. I think they've been here for a while. Her family owns like a chain of bakeries that are all over Rifthold and are like famous for being like so good and so delightful. And she's just the coolest, and we love Nesryn. Selena sneaks up behind Nesryn and holds a knife to her throat. Because Aelin can't meet someone nicely. I guess she doesn't know that she's not like in cahoots with like the King's Guard and gonna like turn her in, but like it's kind of rude, to be honest. Like, Nesryn's a nice lady, please don't stab her in the neck. Anyway, he says to her, you get one sentence to convince me not to spill your throat on the ground. And Nesryn explains that 3 weeks ago, Chaol left the castle and joined the rebel cause. 3 weeks ago was when the beheading happened, when Chaol fled the palace. Nesryn is here to bring like Aelin to him. Like, she was like, I was here to pick you up, take you over to Chaol so you can like say hi or whatever. I don't know. Do whatever you need to. And Aelin is like kind of surprised that like of this turning events, like mostly of the fact that Chaol is no longer part of the King's Guard. She's like, that is so weird. I wonder if Dorian's okay. And then we meet Chaol. Chaol isn't looking good. He's carrying a guy that is like very, very injured, and Selena suspects based on like what he looks like that he was a man who had been possessed by a Valg and is now like free of the Valg, but like still not in the best shape. And based on the darkness in the tunnels, there's a Valg prince somewhere nearby, and the men must have fought their way out. We also have Rhys and Brullo, who are people that Selena knows from back at the castle. They were both members of the King's Guard and are apparently now helping Chaol in the rebel cause. Chaol sends Nesryn away. Nesryn is like very wary to leave Chaol alone with Aelin because she knows Aelin as Selena and as the King's champion. And so she's like, what if the King just sent his champion, his like paid assassin, that he has on retainer to come murder you, Chaol. And Chaol's like, whatever, like, it's fine. I don't think she's gonna kill me. I know some stuff you don't know. And then in this like short little walk, Chaol didn't have like time to spend a lot of time with Celaena in this moment, but he does in this short little walk explain that they've been like what they've been doing, that the Valg have been taking former magic wielders and locking them in the tunnels, then putting wordstone rings or collars on them, and then Chaol and his guys have been going in and trying to rescue them like as much as possible. And Aelin's like, you need to stop, this is like incredibly dangerous, like the Valg are not people that you should be messing with. And Chaol is like, it is not an option. Like, we have to go in because we are the only people who can. Like, you don't understand, like, we need to keep these people safe. And Aelin's like, you figured out that I'm queen, right? Like, we are on the same page about that. I did leave you, like, a pretty good hint. Chaol's like, yeah, the literal day you left, I figured out that you were queen. He's like, also, don't even worry about Fleetfoot. Like, I grabbed her as I was fleeing the palace, and she's safe. I was gonna, like, I tried to keep her here for, like, a minute, but, like, it wasn't working because she, like, barks all the time, and I'm, like, hiding all the time. Like, I'm hiding from the authorities, so I can't have your dog barking all the time. So Nesryn's family own a house like out in the country, and so I sent her out there. She's like vibing. She's like vibing with the sheep. Okay, don't even worry, she's on a little vacay. And Celaena's like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, honestly, totally cool. Thanks for dog sitting. Also, Dorian was the one dog sitting, so now we definitely know we're in trouble. And Aelin's like, we need to like chat. Like, what is going on? And Chaol's like, give me like 40 minutes to like finish up what I'm doing here, and then we can have a little combo. Celaena is just like watching what is going on from the rooftop. She's just keeping an eye on things from up on the roofs. And she watches as they like deal with the Valg stuff, and then she jumps down to have the little chat with Chaol when he's all alone, and they go on a little stroll together. And Chaol tells her about meeting Aedion, and then about the whole situation that happened with Dorian and Sorsha and how she was beheaded. He like tells her kind of like the whole brief story. Chaol explains what Dorian had done to get him out of the castle. He'd sacrificed himself, revealing his power to the king. She was shaking so badly that she tucked her hands into her pockets and clamped her lips together to lock up the words, but they danced in her skull anyway, around and around. You should have gotten Dorian and Sorsha out the day the king butchered those slaves. Did you learn nothing from Nehemia's death? Did you somehow think you could win with your honor intact? Without sacrificing something, you shouldn't have left him. How could you let him face the king alone? How could you? How could you? How could you? The grief in Chaol's eyes kept her from speaking. Okay, well, it won't for very long. Celaena asks about him working with the rebels, and he explained that they are working to try to get into the castle to hopefully get to Dorian and Aedion, but they haven't figured out a way yet. Like, the castle is pretty well guarded, and they haven't been able to figure out how to get into there. And Aelin is so mad at Chaol. Like, she cannot even, like, she has the same reaction I do to Arobynn every time he's on page, where she has, like, a physical reaction to it. She had to, like, clench her hands into fists so she didn't just, like, slam him into a wall. How could he have served that monster? How could he have not seen it, not tried to kill the king every time he got within striking range? And I really feel like in this moment, Aelin is, to some extent, I mean, I think she's mad at Chaol. And I think there is some justification to be mad at Chaol, perhaps. But I also think there is a little bit of, like, projecting in which she is frustrated at herself, because she's also had many opportunities where she's been within a striking range of the king, where she could have taken him out. And she fled her responsibility. She left Crescent and like refused to even look at her responsibility, and has only in the past few months even considered taking responsibility for like who she is and her birthright. And she has let a lot of people die, like in her reflection, as she like thought back to the fact that she wasn't able to free the slaves of Endover and of Calcula before they were slaughtered. And she also knows what it feels like to lose a love like Dorian lost Sorsha. She knows how devastating that is to watch your, like, the person you love be like brutally murdered. She's like mad at Chaol for not stopping it. And she's thinking about that grief, about the grief about losing Sam. And she knows that Dorian's pain, and she hopes that whatever Dorian's father had done to him, however he'd been punished, the prince knew that he was not the only one grieving. And after she retrieved Dorian, she would let him know, when he was ready to listen, that she understood, and that it would be hard and long and painful, but he might come back from it, the loss. When he did, with that raw magic of his free, when hers was not, it could be critical in defeating the Valg. And then Celaena asks Chaol, what have you heard about Dorian since you fled? The fact that she says fled here is just like literally makes Chaol want to die. Like a flicker of shame shone in his bronze eyes. He had fled though. He had left Dorian in his father's hands. This idea that like he just like abandoned his best friend. He abandoned like his true reason for existing. Like Chaol's reason for existing is his loyalty to Dorian, and like by extension that loyalty to the crown and to the institutions surrounding the crown. But like his like primary reason for existing truly is like loyalty to Dorian and for Celaena to not even question that, but just to be like, you completely failed in this aspect that is central to who you are. Chaol's like, oh, Dorian's in a wordstone collar. And then now Celaena is like literally fuming. Literally fuming. She's so upset because she knows the wordstone collar is essentially like a death sentence for Dorian. And she tells him what she was up to in Wendelin and doesn't tell him initially about the wordstone collars because she doesn't want him to freak out, and doesn't mention the word keys because she's like really mad at him and she's decided she doesn't trust him. And so she like leaves out a bunch of stuff. But then he says to her, oh my god, Chaol, I like can't defend you. Oh, my little sweet Chaol, I can't defend this. You're back here alone. You came back without an army, without allies. You came back empty-handed. Okay. I am on Chaol's PR team. He's my boy, and he gets hated on excessively, but that comment, Aelin should have punched him straight in the stomach for that one. Like, what the hell, Chaol? You sent her away and we're like, don't even come back. Don't come back because I love you and I want to keep you safe. And like, this is where your people are. You're half Fae. Go hang out with the Fae. Like, was it misguided? Yeah, but you like told her to peace the heck out. Now she's back. She's here to help you. And you're like, where's the army? Where's your army, girl? Rude. And then Celaena says to him, were you even listening to me? Where should I have gotten allies from, Chaol? From Maeve? She's evil. So, like, where? And then Chaol says to her, the situation here is your fault. The king would have never brought us in that room if he hadn't been threatened by your big show over in Wendelin. Like, he found out that you were back and, like, burning people up with your fire magic, and so now, then he was in a bad mood. He cut off Saoirse's head. And Aelin's like, don't blame me for his actions. And Chaol's like, at least I know the loss of magic wasn't your fault. Why did he bring this up? He immediately, like, oh no, now she's gonna know I know how we got rid of magic. And Celaena's like, oh no, he knows how magic got defeated and he's not gonna tell me because he's mad at me. And like, he thinks that I'm a threat. And Aelin's like, tell me what you learned. Tell me. And Chaol's like, I can't tell you. You're too unpredictable to be told these sorts of things. And Aelin's like, if I had my magic back, I would roast him alive. Like, I would literally cook him. And honestly, at this point, I would support her. I would say, you know what? Chaol maybe deserves a little cooking. Just like a little one in this situation. She decides to do the next best thing, which is to totally just like crush his soul. And she says to this, that collar that Dorian's wearing, let me tell you what it does. And let's see if you refuse to tell me then. If you dismiss what I've been doing these past months. With every word, his face further drained of color. A small, wicked part of her reveled in it. They target magic wielders, fielding off the power in their blood. They drain the life from those who aren't compatible to take a Valg demon. Or, considering Rifthold's new favorite pastime, just execute them to drum up fear. They'd feed on it. Fear, misery, despair. It's like wine to them. The lesser Valg, they can seize a mortal's body through those black rings, but their civilization, a whole damn civilization, she said, is split into hierarchies like our own, and the princes want to come to our world very, very badly. So the king uses collars, black wordstone collars. She didn't think Chaol was breathing. The collars are stronger, capable of helping the demons stay inside human bodies, where they devour the person and power inside. Narok had one. He begged me at the end to kill him. Nothing else could. I witnessed monsters you cannot begin to imagine taking them on, and failed. Only flame or beheading ends it. So you see, she finished, considering the gifts I have, you'll want to tell me what you know. I might be the only person capable of freeing Dorian, or at least giving him the mercy of killing him, if he's even in there. The last words tasted as horrible as they sounded. One of the things that is not my favorite about how this book is put together is we don't get I feel like enough of a chance to explore the like true depths of like despair and grief that Chaol is dealing with in this book, because I think if you have watched the relationship between Dorian and Chaol, you can kind of imagine the heartbreak that would happen, but we don't see a lot of it on page, probably mostly because I think Chaol is really repressing it. We will spend all of Tower of Dawn with Chaol essentially just like doing therapy for this book. Tower of Dawn is just Chaol goes to therapy, sort of. Because I don't think we get to see just like how devastating this news would be to Chaol. The fact that this would just like literally destroy him as a person. I don't think we get to linger on that enough. Because I don't think Chaol lingers on it. Like, I don't think Chaol likes to think about it. Because I think it would ruin, it would just like, I don't think he could continue on. Anyway, he says to Aelin, did it even occur to you to send us a warning? To let any of us know about the king's collars? And Aelin immediately thinks she hadn't even thought of it. And she realizes almost immediately that a warning might have saved Dorian. Like, if they had known, if she had sent a message, Chaol could have gotten them out of there just a little bit faster. And I think this is the moment where we realized they were both in, like, completely impossible situations. Like, Aelin had no idea what was going on back here. And, like, maybe she should have sent a warning, but, like, she wasn't even thinking about, like, how her actions would affect Rifthold, like how just like word of what she was doing would get back and affect Rifthold, and how that information that she had in Wendelin was going to affect them, and like maybe she should have thought of that. And at the same time, Chaol was in the situation where he felt like very cornered, and he was doing the best he could. Like he was plotting and planning to get Dorian and Saoirse out, and he just didn't quite move fast enough. He should have taken the threats more seriously, but he really thought that Dorian would be safe because of his, like it was his own father, and like both of them made like critical errors that could have been avoided, and also both of them acted in ways the other one wouldn't have. Like Aelin would have never left Dorian alone. Like I truly believe that in the castle. It's just like not her temperament, especially after losing Sam. She wouldn't have left him. I also think Chaol would have been much more willing to pass along information to, like if their positions were reversed. I think if Chaol had learned information that he thought was going to keep everyone else safe, I think he might have passed along, although he's not passing along information now, so maybe I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt when I shouldn't be. I think they both really make these choices that they can immediately see the consequences of, and so they can't fully grapple with the consequences if they put that on themselves. Like it would be too devastating, and so they're stuck in this like cycle of blaming each other because they're just like, I think both of them are in like pretty profound pain and grieving over this. Like Aelin is pretty sure even at this point that she's gonna have to kill Dorian. She's gonna have to kill one of her best friends, and Chaol is slowly coming to realize that like he might have like permanently lost his best friend and like is partially his fault. Chaol takes off the Eye of Elena and like chucks it back at Aelin and is like, there's no we anymore. I don't remember what that's in response to. And Aelin is like, it's Aelin now. She snaps as loudly as she dared. Selena Sarthothian doesn't exist anymore. And Chaol says, you are still the same assassin who walked away. You came back only when it was useful for you. And Aelin then is like, why are you meeting with Arobynn? He's literally scum of the earth. Like, why are you meeting with him? And Chaol is like, I need his help. I will take help from literally anyone to get the king and like to take down the king so I can get Dorian back. And Aelin is like, you are so stupid. Like Arobynn's price will always be the suffering and the death of the people you love. Like always. That is always his price. But I think Chaol knows this. I don't think Chaol's an idiot. I think he also just realizes that he would be willing to risk almost anything to get Dorian back and safe. Aelin chucks the purple ring at him. She's like, you can have your ring back. So they like exchange their jewelry, and they're like officially over. This is like the closure they needed, I think, to like completely sever the relationship. Although it's been over for a book. We all know it. Anyway, Chaol goes back to the place he's staying with Nesryn, which is just this like tiny shack bedroom. And he's thinking to himself, Aelin was being a queen tonight. Also just like the meanest lady on the planet. Like she was right. Like she wasn't Selena Sarthothian. Like that was a queen, and she was not a nice queen either. He like saw her and she was like literally covered in blood. She like was coming straight from the vault fight, so she was like covered in blood, and she was just so mean. And he had heard the stories of wreathing Dorinel in flames, and he fears that she would do the same thing to Rifthold if she was given the chance. Like she hates the city, she hates the people in it, and the fact that they like allowed slavery and allowed this king to conquer a whole continent without like really doing anything, and he fears that like she would take out her vengeance on the city, and he like doesn't want that to happen. And then we find out that Nesryn and Chaol spent the summer sharing a bed. Okay, I do have major issues with this. I do think this is like a plot hole because we learned that Chaol fled the palace 3 weeks ago. Have they been together 3 weeks, or were they together all of Airfire and we just didn't know about it? Like I'm confused on Chaol and Nesryn's relationship. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, he's mostly devastated over the news that Dorian might be gone, and he's fearful that Aelin is going to try to kill him. If there's any hope that Dorian can be saved, he doesn't want Dorian to be killed. And honestly, he's unwilling to, like, lose that last shred of hope, because then what is he going to do? And he's going back and forth on whether to tell Aelin how to free magic, because, like, it could possibly save Dorian, but it could also possibly just, like, give her more power and, like, put everyone at more risk. The captain of the guard, when he was the captain of the guard, he would have never told Aelin. Enemy of the crown, but the captain had died with Saoirse in that tower. Like, he is no longer captain of the guard. He's a traitor. Aelin goes back to her home and her little apartment above the warehouse. It's clearly been cleaned and maintained over the last 2 years because it, like, looks nice in there. And she learns that Ren was staying there, but he had fled. Like, clearly things were too dangerous in the city, so he had fled and gone up north. Mortog is also gone. But she quickly realizes it wasn't just Ren that was living there, that Arobynn must have been the one to come in and, like, initially clean it after she went to Endover, because her things are unpacked. Like, she had been packing, if you recall, because her and Sam were going to flee to the southern continent before he died, and all of her things are unpacked and put back in the drawer. Like, a clear signal that Arobynn was like, no, you don't get to leave. And then she goes and she takes a bath, and she thinks about just, like, the burden of her beloved dead. She has her tattoo from Rowan from last book of her beloved dead on her back, and she doesn't want to add another name to the list. But she's also recognizing that because Dorian is in the Wordstone color, she may not have a choice. Like, she might be the one to have to kill Dorian and then add his name to, like, the list of her beloved that are dead. And she's thinking about her role in Dorian's capture, but is also still, like, pretty heavily blaming Chaol, because she knows that if she had been there, she would have never let Dorian face his father alone. Because she is willing to become a monster to save the people that she loves. And then she sends a message to Arobynn and says, I will get you a Valg demon if you will help me get my cousin. Back with the witches, the witch girlies are chilling in Moranth, and Manon does not like Duke Perrington. She's like, I do not like you. And there's just like a very weird vibe over in Moranth. And the host of men, the men that are at Moranth, where they're staying, are like, they smell super weird, and there's just like she says, darkness itself lingered around the mountain. Gross. Upsetting. And she also notes that a raven-haired woman is chained to his side. Kaltain! So we haven't seen Kaltain since Crown of Midnight. Kaltain was this, like, noble woman who was, like, deeply, deeply in love with Dorian, was, like, obsessed with him, had a crush on him, wanted to marry him. And so she got really jealous of Celaena back during the competition and tried to, like, was the one who poisoned her in the fight with Cain, and so then she was sent to the dungeons. And she spent all of Crown of Midnight in the dungeons, where she, like, started to go, like, a little bit crazy. She's a little bit of an opium addict, and so that was, like, part of it, but also she seems to have some, like, connection to magic. There seems to be something magical going on with her. She was having, like, premonitions and, like, saying weird things about Moranth, and her and Celaena, despite the fact that she poisoned Celaena and almost got Celaena killed, kind of the last act, the last thing we see between Celaena and Kaltain is Celaena gives Kaltain her cloak, because the dungeons are freezing cold and Kaltain is down there, and so Celaena gives her a cloak. Okay, so that's Kaltain. She's still here. She's looking terrible. Like, she's in a Wordstone collar. She is all bruised and beaten up. She, like, is not doing well. But then the Duke asks the 13, can you go into the mountains and look at, like, the men of the Wild Fangs, see what they're up to? The witches aren't allowed to eat any. They're just supposed to, like, do some reconnaissance. And it's kind of sad. The witches, like, haven't eaten a man in a while, and it's, like, just kind of a bummer. And so then we get kind of the lay of the land on Moranth. They're allowed to go everywhere except the Duke's private tower. So there's this big tower. They're in, like, this big, like, fortress castle, and their girlies are all over the place except this tower, and that's okay because they don't want to go there because it smells bad. It's time to go on a hunt, because they're not eating the food there, because Manon believes very firmly in not eating this weird food that the Duke is providing. And the 13's wyverns were supposed to be, like, kept kind of in, like, the stables in this, like, basement, and they didn't like that. The 13's wyverns were like, no, and so now they're living up in the Aerie, because essentially Abraxas was, like, stirring up a strike. Like, Abraxas wasn't happy, and so he was talking to all the other wyverns, and he was like, what if we were just, like, literally the most rotten little stinkers? And so now they live up in the Aerie. And Astrid is being a whiner, and she's like, we've been here for 4 weeks, and we have done literally next to nothing. When are we gonna get to fight someone? I thought we were joining the military. We haven't got to eat any men. We haven't got to eat any men. And we barely got to fight, like, anyone. And Manon and her have, like, a little bit of a tiff, and Manon feels like Astrid has kind of been overstepping lately and really has been questioning Manon's authority, because Astrid is like, maybe we should just leave. Like, we have not been really given any tasks that are, like fit for us as witches, and the vibes are rancid here. What if we just, like, peaced out? And Manon's like, literally stop. I, like, can't have you questioning my authority. And if you step your foot out of line one more time, I'm gonna have to kill you. And Astrid's like, okay, whatever. The next day, Aelin goes to breakfast, and when she gets back, Arobynn has left a gift, like, on her coffee table, because apparently he can just get in and out of her house whenever he wants. Lovely. It's her assassin catsuit that she got in Assassin's Blade. She got this, like, really cool catsuit made for her in Assassin's Blade, and she immediately knows it's, like, a test to see how willing she is to, like, forgive and forget. Puts it on, and it's so clear from the catsuit that Arobynn knows her so well. Like, different parts of the catsuit are, like, padded from, like, you know, the places that he knows, like, things tend to tear on her because of the way she fights, and, like, her left knee has, like, some extra support on it because he knows that it's, like, a little bit weaker of a knee. It's just, like, very clear. It's also the signal that, like, he knows her and he knows who she is, and she thinks to herself that she could be Celaena Sarthothian for a little while longer. Like, she's putting on Celaena Sarthothian very much as this, like, intentional disguise, intentional mask over who she really is, which is Aelin. She has stepped into her role as queen, and she's having to be Celaena for a little while longer, but in her heart of hearts, she knows she is Fireheart. And she goes outside and she immediately sees the hooded woman across the street. And she says, "Hey, I came to warn you of something." And Aelin's like, "As far as my memory serves, Lysandra, I warned you that if I ever saw you again, I'd kill you." And this, I love her. This is Lysandra. Lysandra we met briefly in Assassin's Blade. She is the same age as Selena. They could have been friends as easily as enemies. Both of them orphaned, both of them found by Arobynn as children, but Arobynn had handed Lysandra over to Clarisse, his good friend and a successful brothel madam. And though Aelin had been trained for killing fields and Lysandra for bedrooms, they'd somehow grown up as rivals, clawing for Arobynn's favor. When Lysandra turned 17 and had her bidding, it was Arobynn who had won, using the money Aelin had given him to pay off her own debts. This is like one of the most vile things that Arobynn does. And the fact that Aelin will like come to grips with this, but 17-year-old Aelin was like really mad about it and really mad at Lysandra about it. So essentially Aelin came into a large sum of money via the Red Desert, and she used that money to pay off all of her debts, to pay off her debt to Arobynn so she could be free, because essentially everything, Arobynn kept a tally of every little thing that she had like used in her time growing up with him, and was like, "You have to pay me back literally everything before you can leave." She paid him a tremendously large sum of money, and he immediately turned around and used that to buy Lysandra on her bidding. So up until the time you're 17, you're not like you aren't working, and then when you turn 17, they bid off your first job, if you know what I mean, and Arobynn bought that. And Aelin gets really mad about it because, like, they're set up to be rivals, but, like, how horrifying. Like, how horrifying. Ugh, disgusting. Despicable. Anyway, the courtesan had thrown what Arobynn had done and done with Aelin's blood money in her face. So Aelin had thrown something back at her, a dagger. They hadn't seen each other since. Okay, so they're, like, very much enemies. But Lysandra's here. Aelin immediately clocks the fact that there is a little girl in the carriage that Lysandra arrived in. Like, Lysandra arrived with a little girl in her carriage. And Aelin's like, "Don't even worry, I will murder you so quick that little girl won't even see it. So if you brought this girl as like a human shield to protect you from me, it's not gonna work." And Aelin calls the little girl like Lysandra's protege, because that's like how the system tends to work at Clarisse's, where the women that are like actively working will like take on one of the little girls as like a protege to like kind of help train them up. And so Aelin assumes that's what is happening with the little girl in the carriage. And Lysandra is like, "She's not my protege. I just need to talk to you for like a few minutes. She can wait in the carriage, like no big deal." And she's like, "No, I'm gonna bring both of you up. I'm not leaving a little girl in a carriage in the slums. Like, Aelin does not live in a good part of town." And she's like, "That's like too dangerous. Like, she can come up with us." And then we meet Miss Evangeline. Evangeline is no more than 11. She's delicately built, her red gold hair braided back to reveal citrine eyes that gobbled up the drenched streets before her, as stunning as her mistress, or she would have been if it were not for the deep, jagged scars on both of her cheeks. Scars that explain the hideous, branded out tattoo on the inside of the girl's wrist. She had been one of Clarisse's acolytes until she had been marred and lost all value. Aelin winked at Evangeline and said with a conspirator's grin as she led her through the rain, "You look like my sort of person." We love Evangeline. We'll learn a little bit more about her in these like coming pages, but she's like just this young 11-year-old who Lysandra has taken under her wing. So they go up to the apartment, and Aelin gives Evangeline a blueberry tart as a little treat, and Lysandra explains that she was sent by Arobynn to tell Selena the plan, but she also has a warning, and the warning comes from her, despite the fact that the plan comes from Arobynn. And Lysandra still has the tattoo on her wrist that marks her as Clarisse's property, and Aelin is confused because the last time she saw Lysandra, she was just like weeks away from earning her freedom because of that large sum of money that Arobynn paid at her bidding. Like, she should have been close to freedom already, like years ago, and so she's confused why she still belongs to Clarisse. And then Lysandra tells Aelin the plan, and essentially if they want to make Aelian's execution a spectacle, they meaning like the king, then they will make a spectacle of the rescue. Like, the only solution is then to come in with an even bigger spectacle for the rescue. And then Lysandra, now here for the warning, she says, "But I did come to warn you," Lysandra went on. "He might offer you presents, might help you with this rescue, but he's having you watched, and he has his own agenda. That favor you offered him, he didn't tell me what it was, but it is likely to be a trap in one way or another. I consider whether his help is worth it, and see if you can get out of it." And he passes her a letter from Wesley. So Wesley, if you don't recall, Wesley was one of Arobynn's like personal guards at the Assassin's Guild when Aelin was still there. And Aelin and Wesley like didn't get along, but also like did not get along until the day she escaped out her bedroom window to try to like get revenge for Sam. And it was like a setup. Like, Arobynn has essentially set her up, and Wesley tried to warn her and she didn't listen to him, but like from then on she's kind of like felt a little bit of like, oh, maybe I should listen to Wesley. But after she was sent to Endover, Wesley was executed because Wesley took it upon himself to get revenge for Sam, and he's the one who killed Roque Faran. And so after he killed Roque Faran, Arobynn had him killed. Hence the story of Wesley. And Aelin goes to Lysandra as she passes her this letter. Why have you been carrying a letter to me from Wesley for almost 2 years? And Lysandra wouldn't look up because her voice broke as she said, because I loved him very much. Ugh, it's all in there. Everything Arobynn did, everything he planned, and what he asked Faran to do to Sam, and what he'd ordered done to you. All of it. Wesley wanted you to know because he wanted you to understand. He needed you to understand, Selena, that he didn't know until it was too late. He tried to stop it. He did the best he could to avenge Sam. If Arobynn hadn't killed him. Wesley was planning to go to Endover to get you out. He even went to the Shadow Market to find someone who knew the layout of the mines and got a map of them. I still have it as proof. I can go get it. The words slammed into her like a barrage of arrows, but she shut out the sorrow for a man she had never taken the time to consider as anything but one of Arobynn's dogs. She wouldn't put it past Arobynn to use Lysandra to make up this entire story to get her to trust the woman. The Lysandra she had known would have been more than happy to do it, and Aelin would have played along just to learn where it would take her, what Arobynn was up to, and whether he'd tripped up enough to reveal his hand, but what he'd asked Faran to do to Sam. She'd always assumed Faran had just tortured Sam in the way he loved to hurt and break people, but for Arobynn to request specific things to be done to Sam, it was good she didn't have her magic. Good it was still stifled, because she might have erupted into flames and burned for days, cocooned in her fire. And then Aelin's like, get out of my house. I cannot emotionally deal with this. Everyone needs to leave. But Evangeline lingers, and she goes to Aelin and she goes, Lysandra gave me these scars, and Aelin's immediately like, do I need to go? I do need to go kill this girl. She's literally cutting up little girls' faces, and Aelin is like literally halfway out the door to go kill Lysandra when Evangeline explains that she was crying on the day she was dropped off at the brothel. She was like in tears. She was so upset. Lysandra was assigned to be like her mentor. Lysandra is like, okay, there's a way out, but like it's gonna hurt. Like you cannot run away. It's not gonna work. They will catch you, and they will just like beat you if they catch you. But like there's a way that you can get out of this, and it's not gonna be fun. And Evangeline is like, I will do like literally anything to get out of this. Like I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And Lysandra is like, okay. And Lysandra pretends she's angry with Evangeline, and she slices up her face with a knife, and she pretended that it was an act of jealousy, pretended that she was worried about Evangeline kind of overtaking her as one of the top girls, and worried about the competition. And Clarice was so mad that she beat Lysandra in the courtyard, like beat her half to death. And when the healer said my face couldn't be fixed, Clarissa made Lysandra buy me for the amount I would have cost if I had been a full courtesan like her. That's why she's still working for Clarissa, and why she is not free. And won't be for a while. I thought you should know. And then Evangeline goes to leave, and Aelin thinks to herself, if she could change so much in 2 years, perhaps so could Lysandra. And for a moment she wondered how another woman's life would have been different if she had stopped to talk to her. Really talk to Caltaine Rompierre instead of dismissing her as a rapid courtier. What would have happened if Nahimi had tried to see it past Caltaine's mask too? Evangeline was climbing into the rain-gleaming carriage beside Lysandra when Aelin appeared at the warehouse door and said, wait. I think this is like really just like a beautiful story of a reformed pick-me girl, because I do think Aelin had a little bit of that. Like she was just like not like other girls. She was like one of those girls where like she's like, I'm not friends with girls because I don't do drama. And like yes, of course she did have that friendship with Nehemia, but it was like really truly like her only female friendship that she's like ever had in her life. And I think that healed some of her. And I think I know Rowan is not a girl, obviously, but I think this like this friendship with Rowan and the friendship with the cooks in the kitchen and Air Fire, and these friendships with Dorian and Chaol, I think having these friendships with all these men and these friendships have allowed her to kind of like soften to the point where she can even consider having these female friends, which we love. Her and Lysandra's friendship is just like stunning and beautiful, and it's just starting here. But yeah, and I love that she reflects back and she's like, things I think could have been different if I had from the beginning treated women not as competition but as friends. Oh, gorgeous. Anyway, let's check in with our boys who are having a bad time. The bad time boys, they like to call them. So Aedion's vibing in the dungeon. He's like halfway dead. The fever almost got him. He's like, yes, almost there, almost dead. And Dorian shows up, and Aedion has a beard now also. I just felt like that should be noted because it is illustrated here. And did you need to know that? I don't know. But he does have a beard for a short moment of time. Anyway, Dorian shows up in the dungeon. He's in his Wordstone collars, and he's like not even moving like Dorian. Like Aedion is immediately like, oh, this is clearly very bad news. And he immediately is like, hey Dorian, like what happened in the throne room? Can you tell me about that? He's like hoping that the conversation and like the mentioning of Sorsha and like what happened to her will kind of like snap Dorian out of it. And Dorian's like, nothing happened. And then Aedion's like, okay, why are you even here, Dorian? Aedion had never addressed the prince by his given name, but using it, reminding him, seemed somehow important, even if it only provoked the prince into killing. But he says to Aedion, like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Aedion says her name again, Sorsha. Sorsha, your woman, your healer. I was standing beside you when they cut off her head. I heard you screaming as you dove for her body. The thing went a bit rigid and Aedion pressed. Where did they bury her, Dorian? What did they do with her body, the body of the woman you loved? And once again, Dorian says, I don't know what you're talking about. Sorsha, Aedion panted, his breathing uneven. Her name was Sorsha, and she loved you, and they killed her, the man who put the collar around your neck. Aedion thinks maybe he's broken through to Dorian, but then the thing smiles at him, tilts his head and smiles, and he says, I shall enjoy watching you die, General. And then before Dorian leaves, he tells the guy, he's like, hey, that guy is so sick with a fever, like, call him a healer. And Aedion's like, no, my plan! And so that's what's happening there. Then we get a little bit more time with Dorian, and as Dorian is pulled is pulled from the dungeons to the glass castle by the creature and is forced to bow before the king. And the king like muses out loud that he's like, I should like not have waited until you like showed your magic to put you in the collar, because honestly you were so much easier to deal with this on. So like I should have done this sooner. And there goes our check-in. We like to check in on Dorian a few times apart, like, you know, every couple 100 pages or so, just make sure he's still having a bad time. And he is indeed still having a bad time. Back with Chaol and Nesryn, they're at the Shadow Market. The Shadow Market is like essentially like the black market where like all the illegal stuff gets traded. And Chaol's like, in a past life, back when I was the captain, I probably would have been very concerned about all the illegal stuff happening around me, but mostly right now I'm thinking about just these criminals as resources. And the Shadow Market has been like deeply disrupted by what's happening with the Valg and the magic wielders, because the Shadow Market was the first place the king came to like start gathering people to like essentially feed to the Valg. And they're snooping around with Rhys and Brullo, and he finds Nesryn and they're being sneaky when all of a sudden Aelin's there. She just like pops up. She's like, hello. Hello, how are you? I actually need to talk to the boys. I need to talk to Rhys and Brullo. I don't remember which one of them says it, and I didn't write it down. One of them is like, I want to see your face. Aelin went still, but Nesryn turned back, leaned a hand on the table. I saw her face last night, Brullo, and it was as pretty as before. Don't you have a wife to ogle anyway? Aelin snorted. I think I rather like you, Nesryn Falik. Nesryn gave Aelin a half smile, practically beaming coming from her. We love it. Aelin is just gonna become friends with all the girlies. She's like, I'm gonna be friends with Lysandra again, and I'm gonna be friends with Chaol's new girlfriend, Nesryn. I'm a girl's girl now. She's reformed, she's now a girl's girl, and we love her for it. Anyway. And she turns to Brullo and she says, but I do have a favor to ask you, Brullo. And Chaol's like, don't ask any favors of them that will put them in danger. And Brullo's like, okay, Chaol, don't be weird. What do you need? and Aelin's like, don't let your men at Dorian's party, don't let your men be stationed on the southern wall in the gardens, and also have them pin a red flower to their cloaks. And if they like ask you anything, say it's like in celebration of the king. I don't know, make some lie up. But like, could you do that for me? Brullo's like, aye aye, Selena. And she's like, excellent. Then we get checked in back with the witches. Manon once again has been summoned to the Duke's office, which is annoying because honestly, she's not a girl who should be getting summoned. Like, she's like, I think this man has like forgotten that like we are witches. Like, we are independent, we are strong, we are powerful. We are not just like girlies that should be like at your beck and call. And she notes that like Kaltain is there again and has like a really nasty scar on her arm. And she really, empathy seems like a stretch for me at this point, but she thinks a lot about Kaltain and doesn't like worry about her, but just like is like, what's going on there? Anyway, Duke Perrington has a weird, strange little request from Miss Manon. He says, I need you to give me a Blackbeak coven under your command to test. Test how? To determine whether they are compatible for breeding with her allies from another realm, the Valg. Everything stopped. The man had to be mad, but not breed as humans do, of course. That would be an easy, relatively painless procedure, a bit of stone sewn just beneath the belly button. The stone allows them in, you see. A child born of Valg and witch bloodlines, you can understand what an investment that would be. You witches value your offspring so ardently. And Manon is immediately kind of appalled at this. And she's like, my grandma must not know about this because she would never like, she would never agree to this. We are to be your army, not your whores, she said. The Duke just says, pick a coven of Blackbeaks, in reply. I want them ready in a week. Interfere with this wing leader, and I will make dog meat of your precious mount. Perhaps I'll do the same for the rest of the 13. And she says, hey, if you touch Abraxas, I will peel the skin off of your bones. We don't touch Abraxas. Baby Abraxas, he's safe in all this, okay? We love him too much. And as they leave the Duke's office, Astryn is like, you cannot be really considering this. Like, this is despicable. You cannot be considering this. You cannot allow this to happen. And Manon turns and says to her, I've had enough orders for one day. You give me another and you'll find your tongue on the floor. And Astryn says, witchlings are sacred. Sacred, Manon. We do not give them away, even to other clans. And it was true. Witchlings were so rare, and all of them female. As a gift from the three-faced goddess, they were sacred from the moment the mother showed the first signs of pregnancy to when they came of age at 16. To harm a pregnant witch, to harm her unborn witchling or her daughter, was a breach of code so profound that there was no amount of suffering that could be inflicted upon the perpetrator to match the heinousness of the crime. Manon herself had participated in the long, long executions twice now, and the punishment had never seemed like enough. And Astryn just, like, continues to press. She's like, it isn't right. And then Manon scratches the heck out of her. And Manon's like, you are demoted. You are literally causing me so much drama and so many issues. Like, you just keep undermining my authority. You're telling me what to do. Like, you're my third now. Sorrel is going to be my second. We're going to swap a row. Like, and you are responsible for telling everyone. Like, you're driving me nuts. Even though, like, Astryn is saying things that, like, we probably agree with. And when Manon gets up to her room, she's already in a cranky mood because Astryn's been bothering her. The Duke is asking her, like, weird stuff. And she gets up there and there's a human girl in there cleaning. And Manon's like, ugh, annoying. And she immediately notices that this human girl has her ankles chained and she's, like, limping. She has, like, severe limp. And Manon is like, why did they send you? And the girl is like, I can leave. Like, I was supposed to clean before you got back, but, like, you got back sooner than I thought. I can go. And Manon's like, do your work and then leave. Who did that to you? Like, your ankle is, like, all mangled. It's causing your limp. And Elide is like, I fell down the stairs when I was 8 and my uncle didn't trust a healer. And Manon's like, why are you in chains? Also, like, no one else here is in chains. Another flatboard question. And Elide says, so I couldn't run away. And Manon's like, run where? You're in the mountains. Like, where are you gonna run to? She's like, well, I've, like, always been chained around my ankles. I grew up in Parenth, not here, so, like, there's more places for me to run. Anyway, if you have need for me, just call for Elide. The guards will know where to find me, and, like, I'm happy to help you out. So Elide is, like, trying to piece out of this conversation. She's like, anyway, I gotta go. And Mana's like, was your uncle ever punished for, like, not letting you be treated? And Elide is like, no. He's the Lord of Parenth, so, like, there was no one to punish him. He's, like, top dog. And Mana's like, why are you here? Like, why did he bring you here? And Elide goes, I don't know. Not my business. And Manon threatens her if she ever spies, and she's already, like, a little suspicious of Elide. She's like, I kind of don't trust you entirely, but if you ever spy, I'm gonna kill you. And Elide's like, awesome, toodaloo. If you recall, we actually already know this little nugget. She's constantly described as just, like, the tiniest little angel child, in fact, to the point where it's, like, definitely not in the text. The text, like, is, like, very clear that she's, like, 18, she's an adult, she's just, like, a small woman. But, like, the first time I read this, I, like, really did picture her as, like, a 12-year-old. She's just, like, constantly, her biggest descriptor is tiny. She's, like, a little tiny lady. But we knew her when she was a little baby in real life because she's Lady Marian's daughter. And so Lady Marian was the woman who sacrificed herself so Aelin could get away on the night that, like, Crescent fell. And her daughter Elide was, like, a year or two younger than Aelin back in Crescent, and they didn't spend a lot of time together. They didn't really spend a lot of time hanging out, but they knew each other, and Lady Marian was, like, best friends with Aelin's mother. So, like, they ran in the same circles, and we saw baby Elide in some of the, like, flashbacks. They're, like, out on a little flight. They have to go to the blacksmith, and the flight pattern has changed because Sorrel is now the second, so she needs to fly right next to Manon. And Abraxas and Sorrel's wyvern are just, like, fighting, like, constantly because of this new arrangement. And Manon doesn't love this, and Sorrel is like, But, like, they got errands to run, and we don't have time to deal with this right now. They're going to the blacksmith to get some new weapons for the coven. As they're flying back, Sorrel and Manon have a little combo. Sorrel's like, maybe you should let Astryn be the second again. And Manon's like, do you not want to be second? Do you not like it? Is it not an honor to be my second? And Sorrel's like, yeah, but, like, also it was an honor to be your third, so we could just like go back to that. That would be so great. And also, Astrid is way cooler than me, and like should be the second probably. And Manon is like, you guys have been so annoying lately. Who is the boss? It's me. Please stop undermining my authority. And Sorrel's like, we haven't been able to kill men in any ages, and it's bound to make us a little bit cranky, okay? Like, it has been like kind of a rough go, so you have to give us a little bit of extra grace. Also, your grandmother isn't around to keep us in line. And Manon is like, are you saying that I'm a bad leader? Am I not enough? And Sorrel says, I'm saying the 13 know why your grandmother made you kill that Croatian witch for that cloak. And Manon thinks to herself, dangerous, such dangerous ground. And Manon goes, I think sometimes you forget what my grandmother can do. Sorrel says, trust me, Manon, we don't. And more than any of us, Astrid has never for a second forgot what your grandmother is capable of. Manon's stomach tightens at that, but she doesn't ask more. We will learn more of Astrid's story at some point. And it is a hard one. Aelin shows up at the Assassin's Keep. She's like invited. It looks pretty much the same as it did 2 years ago, except in Arobynn's office, there is a new rug. She like immediately clocks it as soon as she gets in the room, and Arobynn knows that she does because he says to her, a new rug. He said, looking up from the papers before him, the bloodstains on the other one never came out. Pity, she said, slumping into one of the chairs before his desk. Try not to look at the chair beside hers, where Sam had usually sat. The other rug was prettier, until her blood had soaked it when Arobynn had beaten her for ruining his slave trade agreement, making Sam watch the entire time. And when she was unconscious, he had beaten Sam into oblivion too. She wondered which of the scars on Arobynn's knuckles were from those beatings. And Aelin is like, hey, why did you summon me here? And Arobynn is like, just checking on you before Dorian's big birthday tomorrow, and you're like big going to rescue your cousin. And Aelin's like, don't even worry, I'm not even planning on betraying you, so like don't even worry. And Arobynn's like, also, like, where is my Valg demon? You told me you would give me a little Valg, and I don't have one, so what's the deal with that? And Aelin's like, I'm gonna get you one after I freed Aedion. Like, freeing Aedion, step 1, step 2, getting you a little Valg demon. And Arobynn's like, also, I sent you Lysandra so you could murder her as a little present. You didn't even kill her. And Aelin's like, maybe stick to clothes and jewelry going forward instead of sending people for other people to murder. Okay, just a thought. And his eyes followed her and lingered. So she's in the cat suit. She's in like the assassinary cat suit that Arobynn got her. And Arobynn says to her, okay, you ready for this? This is very upsetting. He says to her, his eyes followed in hers and lingered. You fill it out better than you did at 17. Like, the first time I read this, I was physically ill. Like, I became nauseous. This man deserves the worst of everything. Like, those medieval torture devices where they, like, put you on them and it, like, just stretches you out until you, like, pop. Let's put him on one of those. Have we thought of that? Just a suggestion. I think it would work well. And then it goes on, and their conversation continues. Arobynn says to her, you will need to lie low with your cousin once he escapes tomorrow. Should you decide not to fulfill your end of the bargain, you'll find out very quickly, Selena darling, how deadly the city can be for those on the run, even fire-breathing bitch queens. Selena goes, no more declarations of love, or offers to walk over hot coals for me? A sensual laugh. You were always my favorite dance partner, Arobynn said. He came close enough to graze his lips against hers if she should sway so much as a fraction of an inch. If you want me to whisper sweet nothings in your ear, your majesty, I'll do just that. But you will still get me what I need. How does she not murder this man all the time? That's self-control that I could never. And then she's like going to leave, and then Arobynn's like, what about your princes? And Aelin is like, princes? What are you talking about, my friend? And Arobynn goes, Dorian and the princes that share his body. Does your captain know that you plan on killing him before he becomes a problem? And Aelin's like, I don't know. You're the one who's having meetings with him, so like maybe you should ask him. And Arobynn's like, did you know he's sleeping with Nesryn? And Aelin is a little surprised, honestly. Like, I think she suspected they were maybe together a little bit, but Chaol got so weird about the fact that she spent so much time with Rowan, like in the retellings of like what she had been up to in Wonderland, that she's like surprised that Chaol had already moved on. But she, like, is kind of okay. Like, she doesn't care that much. My notes on this scene say, sorry, I'm going to essentially read you this entire scene because I love Lysandra and Aelin so much. The friendships in this series are unmatched, and seeing these two have the ultimate enemies to besties arc, it's so good. The girls are girlying. Okay, so that's what we're about to jump into. When Selena gets back to her apartment, Lysandra is waiting for her, and she also brought snacks. She brought snacks, and she says, hey, did you know there's a little guy over there? There's a little guy over on that roof spying on you. And Aelin's like, oh, that's Chaol's little guy. He's like really harmless, and he thinks he's being so sneaky, so I pretend I don't see him so I don't hurt his feelings. He's like, don't even worry about it. And Lysandra's like, oh, cool. And then Aelin says to Lysandra, remember, she's still trying to reform herself into a girl's girl. this isn't a girl statement, but she's trying. We're working, we're growing, and we're getting there. The Lysandra I knew used to wear far less clothing, Aelin said. Lysandra's green eyes flickered. The Lysandra you knew died a long time ago, and Aelin thinks to herself, so had Celaena Sarthotian. And she's glad that Lysandra's here because she really does want to have a little chitty chat. And Lysandra starts to say, I used to be so jealous of you. Not only did you have Sam, but also Arobynn. I was such a fool, believing that he gave you everything and denied you nothing, hating you because I always knew, deep down, that I was just a pawn for him to use against you. A way to make you fight for his attention, to keep you on your toes, to hurt you. And I enjoyed it because I thought it was better to be someone's pawn than nothing at all. I think I would have continued on that way for my whole life, but then Arobynn killed Sam and arranged for your capture and summoned me the night you were hauled to Endover. Afterwards, on the carriage ride home, I just cried. I don't know why, but Wesley was in that carriage with me. That was the night that everything changed between us. And Celaena's like, wow, that is like a very dangerous thing to say. Like, you were very blatantly and openly admitting that, like, you're not an Arobynn fan. And Lysandra's like, I know that you destroyed the vault, and like, it was clearly as vengeance for Sam. Besides, if you betray me, there is little more that can hurt me more than what I've already endured. And Lysandra is like beginning to like grapple with the fact that Lysandra has endured so much. Like, has really, her life has been a different kind of brutality than Aelin's, but also like brutality in this, like, just the same. Aelin says to her, the other night you didn't just come to warn me about Arobynn. And Lysandra says, no, I came to help you destroy him. And then Aelin says, I went too long without demanding retribution. I have no interest in forgiveness. And then Lysandra says, after he murdered Wesley, I lay awake in his bed and thought about killing him right there, but it didn't seem like enough. The debt didn't belong only to me, Lysandra said. For a moment, Aelin couldn't say anything. Then she shook her head. You honestly mean to imply that you've been waiting for me this whole time? And Lysandra says, you loved Sam as much as I loved Wesley. Her chest hollowed out, but she nodded. Yes, she'd love Sam. More than she'd ever loved anyone, even Chaol. And reading Wesley's letter, exactly what Arobynn had ordered Rook Farron to do to Sam had left a raging wound in the core of her. Sam's clothes were still in the bottom two drawers of her dresser, where Arobynn had indeed unpacked them. She'd worn one of his shirts to bed these past 2 nights. Arobynn would pay. We love that. And Aelin says, I'm sorry, Aelin said, for the years spent being a monster towards you, for whatever part I played in your suffering. I wish I'd been able to see myself better. I wish I'd seen everything better. I'm sorry. Lysandra blinked. We were both young and stupid, and should have seen each other as allies, but there's nothing to prevent us from seeing each other that way now. Lysandra gave her a grin that was more wolfish than refined. If you're in, I'm in. And they've decided to be friends. We love this. Aelin is a little bit nervous that she is going to have another friend. She feels a little bit like she's replacing Nehemia, but I think she is like, she knows she needs to do it anyway. Like, she knows that even though there's a little bit of fear here, she needs to proceed forward. Lysandra, on the other hand, is like so excited. She's like, we're gonna eat chocolate, we're gonna go shopping, we're gonna talk about boys, and we're gonna talk about clothes, and it's gonna be so much fun, and we love it. And they giggle. And they start talking about the plan that is like Arobynn's plan for tomorrow night, and Lysandra has a couple suggestions of ways they might be able to tweak it. Then we're checking in with Chaol, Nesryn, and Aelin. They are they're like full preparations for Dorian's birthday party and Aedion's execution. And Chaol is there. Chaol is annoyed that Aelin just showed up. Like, essentially, like the first half of this book, at least, probably into the second half, honestly this whole series to some extent, is Chaol being like, okay, I'm about to do something super sneaky and secret. And Aelin being like, hello, I'm here. And that's what happened here. So all 3 of them are on this rooftop, and he's so scared that she's gonna kill Dorian. Like, he's so stressed about it. And Nesryn is trying to shoot down the guards at the palace while Chaol and Aelin, like, essentially just bicker over whether they should kill Dorian or not. And Aelin's like, killing him would be a mercy. And Chaol's like, if you kill Dorian, I will make sure Aedion dies too. And Aelin's like, if you bring my courts into this, Chaol, Aelin said with a lethal softness, and I don't care what you were to me or what you would have done to help me. You betrayed them, you hurt them, and I don't care how long it takes, how far you go. I will burn you and your goddamn kingdom to ash. Then you'll learn how much of a monster I can be. And Nesryn is like, could you please stop? I'm like literally trying to do work here. We are like, I'm trying to murder these people, like sharpshoot them down Katniss style from the top of this roof, and you guys are bickering in the back the whole time. She's so annoyed that she's being forced to work with these two, and honestly, yeah. Nesryn can't get a clear shot, but like Aelin immediately recognizes her talent, and she's giving her so many compliments, and Chaol recognizes that Aelin knows that him and Nesryn are together, are like some sort of thing, but he like is kind of like surprised that Aelin is still complimenting Nesryn. But like, sorry, game recognizes game. As they're watching, a few prisoners, people who had some connection to magic, are being brought out while the crowds cheer and throw fruit, like kind of like cheering for these executions. And Chaol thinks to himself, maybe the city did deserve Aelin Galathinius' flames. Maybe Chaol deserved to burn too. He like recognizes kind of the evilness that is just like seeped into just even the regular people in the city, that when you kind of like celebrate these evil things, it really changes kind of the structure. Even though there are good people within the city as a whole has kind of become rotten, and it has rotted a lot of like the regular people too. And he flashes back to Sorsha in the castle, and he thinks to himself, oathbreaker, liar, traitor. Chaol was all those things now, but not to Dorian, never to his true king. And he whispers to Aelin, take out the clock tower in the garden, he said, the words barely audible. He felt Aelin turn towards him, and magic will be free. It was a spell, 3 towers, all built of wordstone. Take out one, and magic is free. He immediately starts running worst case scenarios about like what this will do with magic, and he starts talking to Aelin about like the king's magic and how the king might use magic to trap Aelin at Dorian's birthday party in a few days. And they're like teamworking and scheming, and Aelin's like, if only I had the books from the library, I could figure out a spell to protect Aedion and I. And Chaol's like, don't even worry, I took the books. I took your dog, I took your books. I'm looking out for you, girly. I may not be perfect, but I know it's important, and books and dogs are really important. And then Aelin decides that these streamers would look better with the Valg blood on them, and she decides, okay, our plotting and scheming, done, we're done, now I'm gonna go murder some people. And she races across the square, leaving Nesryn on the roof, and Chaol is like trying to catch up with her, but she's a speedy lady. And she stabs the guard in the neck while Chaol distracts the other guys, and they like are able to kind of get the prisoners out. Aelin, meanwhile, is frolicking on the rooftops, kind of leading a bunch of the King's Guard on a chase throughout the city. The real reason she attended the execution today was to assess how difficult it would be to kill the Valgs with the rings as opposed to the dudes with the collars. Because she knows the dudes with the collars are like tough to kill. You have to essentially behead them. And she wants to know if the same is for the guys with the rings. She finds a gaggle of them and she murders all 6 of them. So like turns out not that hard. So easy breezy. It's Dorian's birthday. Happy birthday, Dorian. It's execution day. Aedion's recovered from his fever and they are planning to slice off his head with the sword of Moranth. So exciting. And also they shaved off his beard. So bearded Aedion is no more. That was just for a moment. Happy birthday, Dorian. We get this day from Dorian's perspective. He's in a bad mood because his mom hasn't even noticed that he's been taken over by a Valg prince. He's like, my mom hasn't even noticed that I'm like evil now. And also my dad is evil. So like he's in a bad mood because he's sitting between them. And he thinks to himself, perhaps the world deserved to be devoured by this thing. He's in a bad mood. He's cranky. You know what? Sometimes you are cranky on your birthday. Like it happens. I imagine it would happen even more if you were possessed by a Valg prince. Aelin, meanwhile, is in disguise with the dancers outside. Florine is her contact within the dancers and was her dance teacher back when she was an assassin. Arobynn made them all like train in dances, particularly Aelin, because it was important for them to like know the court dances because they were often required to go to these very formal events as part of their like assassinary duties. And she continued them even after she left Arobynn. After she bought her freedom from Arobynn, Florine continued to teach her to dance and didn't charge her, and she let Aelin play the piano after class until her fingers hurt because Aelin couldn't afford one of her own. And Aelin loves to play the piano. The dancers are all helping with this plot and they have an escape plan. They immediately have to essentially get on a ship just from here. Like they weren't allowed to pack any of their belongings. They weren't able to plan ahead. Essentially there's a ship waiting for them at the docks, so as soon as like the shenanigans happen at the birthday, they gotta peace out. Thus begins our scheming time. So Aelin bumps into one of the other dancers and immediately starts crying. She's just like weeping, pretending to be like injured and just like kind of a mess. And Florine asks the guards to get her water, and he returns with a bucket and a ladle, which is apparently how they drink water. They don't have Stanley cups, they just have buckets and ladles. Is that how they drank water in the olden days? I feel like they still had cups. Maybe not. Florine then takes Aelin away to like the doorway of one of like in the hall and to fix her makeup. As they are waiting, Aelin trips and spills the whole bucket of water. And Florine is yelling at her while Aelin uses that water to clean up the word marks that are on the door frame. So there's word marks on like the openings to every single door in here, and so Aelin is using this water to wipe those away because she suspects, she doesn't know exactly what the word marks are going to do, but probably not good things. So she's making sure those are gone. Then all of the dancers are heading inside the glass castle. Aelin spots Nesryn, who is in the castle, but she's trying to be sneaky so none of the servants or anything recognize her, because remember, she used to live here for a while, so she needs to not be recognized. And Florine is prepping each of them to go and dance and gives them each these like black glass flowers. Is like, okay, girlies, are we ready? And then she turns to Aelin and she says, I've wondered where Arobynn found you, Florine murmured, why he took such pains to break you to his will, more so than all the others. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, steel gleamed there. When you shatter the chains of this world and forge the next, remember that art is as vital to food to a kingdom. Without it, a kingdom is nothing, and will be forgotten by time. I have amassed enough money in my miserable life not to need any more. So you will understand me clearly when I say that wherever you set your throne, no matter how long it takes, I will come to you, and I will bring music and dancing." Aelin swallowed hard before she could say anything else. Florine left her standing at the back of the line and strolled to the door. She paused before it, looking down the line at each dancer. She spoke only when her eyes met Aelin's. "Give our king the performance he deserves." We love this. And then it begins. And Aelin thinks to herself, if these were her last moments, then at least she would go down fighting to the sound of exquisite music. It was time. One breath, another. She was the heir of fire. She was fire and light and ash and embers. She was Aelin Fireheart, and she bowed to no one and nothing, save that the crown that was hers by blood and survival and triumph. And then it begins. The dancers are coming out and they're dressed all in black. I know they're not in this image, but it was really hard to find dancers that were dressed in black, okay? And they're supposed to be dressed like Death's handmaiden, and they start sprinkling this like black powder everywhere that's supposed to like represent like ashes and like mortality. And Aedion spots another dancer moving through the crowd, but strangely she has a bunch of back tattoos, and he's like, that is weird. Normally the ballet dancers aren't like tatted up. And she disappears for a moment, and she comes back out, and now she's dressed like a noble. And she gets close enough, and he can see her eyes. And she has turquoise, ash river eyes. Then all of a sudden, behind them, across the hall, the dancers shattered their roses on the floor, and Aedion grinned at his queen as the entire world went to hell. Aelin is stabbing people left and right because the roses crushed, and then there's like smoke everywhere. So Aelin's stabbing people left and right, and she's so relieved to see that Aedion does not have a black collar on. And Florine is getting her dancers out, and Aedion carves a word mark onto Aelin carves a word mark onto Aedion's chains and is able to get him out of his chains. They're able to be free. Aedion is super weak, but he's able to follow her. She grabs the sword of Moranth because it's sitting right by him, ready to chop his head off. She grabs that. She tells Aedion to stay close, and they're getting out. Aedion's shouting that there's a fire, and people start panicking and just chucking buckets of water everywhere. Honestly, this wouldn't be my first thought if someone started shouting fire. I wouldn't be like, let me just throw water everywhere. Also, where did they get the buckets of water? Were there like just buckets of water everywhere in like preparation? You know how like when you like before you do something where you might catch stuff on fire, you're supposed to have like a fire extinguisher or some like water handy? Was that like the vibe? Like, why is there buckets of water everywhere? I'm a little bit confused. Anyway, it's erasing all the word marks now. So we've erased some of the word marks. Now we're erasing all the word marks. And she's home free. So her and Aedion get out of the castle like pretty easily, and they're almost at the hedge at the end of the garden. And Aedion is like struggling. You know, he was down in the dungeons for like a month, and he is like pretty weak. Remember, he was like fevered for a lot of it. He's not doing well, but like they're getting out, and they're a line of 12 guards waiting for them at the like hedge. And Aelin just turns to Aedion and says, "Don't get in my way." And Rowan had taught her a few new tricks. She was a whirling cloud of death, a queen of shadows, and these men were already carrion. And she just murders him real quick. And Aedion's mad impressed, and Aelin thinks they're like home free until she sees Dorian starting to walk towards them. Immediately, Aelin knows that Dorian isn't her friend, but is Valg. Like, you can just like see it in the way he moves. Like, he is not Dorian. And the archers, she knows the archers can't get to them. They're out of the archers' reach, but she knows they need to get out. Like, every second she wastes is a second that like more guards are gonna be on the city streets, and it's gonna be harder for them to get from like the castle to safety. And Dorian reaches out with his magic, which is black now. He used to have like blue ice magic, but now he has black powers. And Aelin is completely painted in word marks in her blood. So she is shielded, but she can almost immediately like feel the shields like starting to break down. And she tells Aedion to run towards the wall. And Aedion is like, "Girlie, that is not the prince anymore. You just need to..." And Aelin knows that, but she wants to give him a second. She wants to have some hope that he's still in there. But she grabs the sword of Moranth and approaches Dorian. And Aelin is like, "Please just give me a single sign, some small glimmer that you were in there, and I won't do this." And Dorian takes a step closer to her, and he immediately gets trapped in a little word mark that she had drawn on the dirt with her toe. And he doesn't give, like, he's clearly not there. And she draws up her sword to kill him, when all of a sudden Nesryn knocks the sword out of her hand with an arrow. And then as soon as that sword is out of her hand, she points her arrow at Aedion. And she says to Aelin, if you strike the prince, I will shoot the general." And Aelin is like, "You are a shit spy. You didn't even try to remain hidden when you watched me inside." And Nesryn says, "You lied. Arobynn told us that you planned to kill the prince." And Aelin says, "You and Chaol are fools." Aelin said, even as part of her heaved in relief, even as even as she wanted to admit that what she'd been about to do made her a fool as well. Aelin lowered the sword to her side. The thing inside Dorian hissed at her. "You will regret this moment, girl." Aelin just whispered, "I know." Aelin didn't give a shit what happened to Nesryn. She sheathed the sword, grabbed Aedion, and ran. She's like, okay, fine. If I'm not going to be able to kill Dorian, we're going to GTFO. And her and Aedion make it up over the wall, and Aedion is, like, really struggling. And Aelin is, like, essentially dragging him behind her. They just need to make it, like, 4 blocks from the palace. And finally they are able to. Aedion is not looking well. They reach a carriage. Lysandra is inside, and they hide Aedion down in this, like, luggage compartment down on the bottom. And Aelin, like, changes outfits. So she is, like, in a gown now, and they are pretending to be courtesans on the way to an appointment, her and Lysandra. And they're, like, stopped, but the guards are like, oh, 2 courtesans, you guys can go. They take the carriages to the slum where Chaol is waiting for them, and they help her, and he helps her carry Aedion into Aelin's apartment. So they're back in the apartment. They're pretty much safe. Aelin takes a quick bath because she's gross. And Aedion's got, like, a pretty serious injury in his ribs. Lysandra stitches him up. And Chaol's like, tell me what happened. And Aelin's like, I killed a lot of people. Not really in the mood to do, like, a full recap right now. So, like, I will talk to you later about it. Like, I'm tired. It was a rough day. And Chaol's like, killing people never bothered you before. Okay, Chaol. I need you to stop. Okay? That's not how we speak to her. And Aelin says, the next time you decide you don't trust me, try not to prove it at a time when my life or Aedion's is on the line. And clearly Chaol has already spoken to Nesryn and knows that Aelin tried to kill Dorian. Also, like, had been suspicious of that because Arobynn had planted that idea. And Chaol says to her, you tried to kill him. You said you tried to get him out to help him, and you tried to kill him. And then Aelin says, you know what I did? I gave him 1 minute. I gave him 1 minute of my escape. Do you understand what can happen in a minute? Because I gave 1 minute to Dorian when he attacked Aedion and me today to capture us. I gave him a minute in which the fate of my entire kingdom could have changed forever. I chose the son of my enemy. And Chaol is just, like, so upset. He's just, like, cannot fathom the idea that Aelin would try to kill Dorian, and just, like, it hurts him. And she says to her, you're a liar. You've always been a liar, and today was no exception. You had a sword over his head. And Aelin said, I did, and I should have killed him because Dorian is gone. I don't owe you an apology. And, like, she's shattered about this too. Like, she loved Dorian too. Not the same amount. I think Sarah will try to convince us that Aelin and Chaol loved Dorian the same amount, and it's not true. Chaol loved Dorian more than anyone has ever loved anyone in the life, to be honest. Chaol loves Dorian a lot. And Chaol is like, don't talk to me like you're my queen. And Aelin says, no, I'm not your queen, but you're going to have to decide soon whom you serve, because the Dorian you knew is gone forever. Ardelayne's future does not depend on him anymore. And she's like, okay, you are clearly bad vibes, bad energy. Go up on the roof and watch the Kingsmen. You can be on first watch. I, like, don't want to be in the room with you anymore. Chaol is clearly being, like, the worst in this book, but I do think we have to, like, once again, recognize how decentering this experience would be, because, yeah, what is Chaol now if he's not loyal to Dorian? Like, what is he supposed to stand for? We very much get this impression, like, especially, I think, last book in the conversations with Aedion, like, what do you stand for, Chaol? Like, what is your line of morality? What is the thing that is, like, the most important thing to you? Aelin has, like, very clearly has people. Like, she has Rowan, she's got Aedion, now she's got Lysandra too. Like, she has people, she has a kingdom, she has something she is fighting for. And Chaol has got Dorian. Like, that's the only thing he has to fight for. And if he finds out that thing is gone, like, where does that leave him? And so I think there's a tremendous amount of grief in that. And not only the grief in which losing his best friend would cause him, but just, like, the grief over losing his purpose. But anyway, he goes upstairs. And then we're just left with Lysandra and Aelin and in the room, and Lysandra's like, hey girly, why do you guys keep talking about how the fact that you're a queen? And Aelin is like, oh yeah, I am the queen of Crescent, so I am Aelin Galthinius. Had to keep that on the DL until Aedion was safe, but, like, yep, queen. And Lysandra's like, does Arobynn know? And Aelin says, he's always known. This changes nothing between us, nothing, just so you know. And Aelin's like, honestly, this, like, actually makes a lot of sense. You and Aedion look literally identical. I don't know why no one's noticed this earlier. And then she says, this is a weird comment. Lysandra says, even though he's a handsome bastard, it'd be like kissing you. And Aelin goes, okay, I could have lived without knowing that. So could have I. Like, what a weird thing to say. And she says, I don't know why I was ever nervous he would start bowing and scraping. Light and understanding dance in Lysandra's eyes. Where would be the fun in that? Okay, and that's where we're pausing. That is the end of video 1. It's not the end of part 1. There's gonna be 4 videos for Queen of Shadows instead of 2. They're gonna be a little bit shorter for each of them because last for Airfire, I had so many technical issues with those videos. So I'm hoping if I try to keep them a little bit shorter, they will work a little bit better, but that way they're going to be multiple videos. That way we can still go into the same amount of depth, because I want to tell you all the details. There's no way that I can't just like read to you every scene that Aelin and Lysandra are in. I need to tell you every single compliment they exchange. It's important to me. This is part 1, video 1 of 4 videos that are going to cover Queen of Shadows. But that's the plan, Stan. That's the plan, is that this one, and probably all future books, because these last 4 books are all pretty long each, are going to be split into probably 4 videos each. Oh my gosh. We're going to have like 19 hours of content. Sorry, everyone. You come here for the detailed. I feel like there's people that have Throne of Glass recaps that are significantly shorter than mine. And if that's your vibe, they're out there. This is just, we have a lot of details. I have a lot I want to say. And I want to tell you about how the girls are girling. Okay. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you know when Queen of Shadows part 2, when the second video comes out. And I will talk to you in the next video, where we get to the second half of part 1, where one of my favorite scenes of all time lives. There's a couple of them. I will probably cry. I will almost definitely cry in this next video, because the scene that makes me cry the hardest in the, well, maybe not the hardest. There's a scene in this part that like I cannot get through without like literally choking up. So I'm sure I will cry in the next video. So that's something to look forward to. There's also some fun times. Also, the girls are girling. We get to do some really fun stuff with Manon and Elide, and I love them so much. Okay, I will see you then. Bye.